That's your favorite part, isn't it? The good thing is we always start with a smile because you always start giggling.
I'm just like a little kid. So how are you today, James?
Hey, Susie, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Great. I
I
like
was,
that jacket. That's really
thank
classy.
you. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a little
Uh,
bit, it's fall around here. So it's a little
I
bit,
feel you. I know it's a little wintry where I am up here in the mountains.
yeah, can't be fishing today.
No, I took the fishing pole down, in fact, and painting. So no more fishing.
Well, and last time we were together off camera, I said to you, what kind of concept do you want to talk about? And so I'm this week saying to you, what do you think we should scratch at today?
One of the things that came up when we were talking was about somebody that you were working with who had applied and gotten an executive role, but found that they've really ended up doing a very different function in that role than the one that they technically, arguably, were hired for. And it made me think about the jobs that I'd been hired for and how I often drifted away from what I felt like maybe was the firm's intention. And I started thinking about how people actively and passively do that. And I was reminded of an article I read a while back about a concept called job crafting, which is really the act of actively adjusting your job to better fit your skills. And I think that there's a really great opportunity to talk about that in leadership and saying, look, you can do this in a way that both makes you more productive and also makes you better at your job. And your satisfaction always ends up leading to your company's satisfaction. Maybe not always. We'll say 90% of the time.
What I love about that is because, I've worked with people with their strengths, so
Yep,
very
that's exactly
aligned.
right.
And really the research shows that when you do something that comes naturally to you, you do it with not only excellence, but also a lot more passion. And so I love that alignment with who you are as a person. So tell me more about how does that actually tactically work within an organization?
Well, I think it's interesting. I have two interesting examples. One about in the article I read, which is actually written by a couple of researchers in the Michigan Ross School of Business. And then they republished an updated version in the HBR in 2020. But what they're talking about is it's not a passive accidental action. It's an active decision. So, for example, in the paper they wrote, they talked about how a chef goes from being a cook to making his work an art. So, and that cognitive change in your head saying, look, no longer am I just providing French fries, I'm making sure that those things it is a representation of me. Now, it's harder when we're talking French fries, but if you talk about a cook working somewhere they have a little bit of flexibility, which I think is key, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but you can change the way you look at your job, and that's an active decision. And that allows that person to behave better and be more productive because they're thinking of it that they are contributing in a way that is artistic versus just being a menial cook. The other example is my example. When I was hired as the CTO of a small startup in Denver here, I walked in the door, did my meet and greet with everybody. I went to my office, and the IT leader came in and handed me a dog-eared piece of paper that was probably ripped out of a spiral notebook and a coffee stain on it. And he handed it to me and he goes, here are all the root passwords. And I said, so the root passwords, for those of our listeners that don't know, are the passwords to all the servers, and they're the superpower, the God login that you can do anything. And by having those, I would be able to absolutely fix and create all the problems. And I handed it back to him. I'm saying, that's just not me. I don't want that. And if I have those, I'm the wrong guy for this job. And that was within 24 hours, 8 hours of having that job, that I pivoted from what that previous CTO had, because he had those, it was important to him and he maintained those, to me. And I immediately changed the way that my role would be structured. And that, while it was an active decision, it did allow me to be better at what I was doing and showed vis-a-vis the previous CTO what I brought to the table. so essentially I was job crafting. I'm saying, look,
Yeah.
I am not this guy. I am this guy. And I think what is neat about this concept is it was really about, look, you as a individual contributor or manager, which I think are both part of this discussion, should decide what do you like to do and how do you actively make your job more aligned with that. And I think it's that decision-making process which gives you the empowerment and makes you more successful in the role.
I guess the thing that comes to mind for me is, where are those lines? Like, when do you go, well, that filing and keeping track of all the CRM data and metadata, just not what I do well. So I'm going to give that to somebody else. Like, what I'm getting at. Like,
sure, I totally do.
How do you empower somebody to own it in the way that's going to be beneficial to them and the organization?
Well, let's be clear. There's a difference between, job crafting and dereliction of duty. I mean, you can't just say, I just don't feel like getting on the computer this year, or that's just there is a line. But I do think that, in fact, the research shows that there are three really interesting ways that you can do this. There's through tasks, which you described, crafting your tasks to be different. There's relationship crafting, which I think is really interesting. And then there's cognitive crafting, which I kind of talked about. So let me take a gander at each one of those three things. I also would like 2 internet points for using the word gander in a podcast. Not often happening.
2 points.
Thank you. 2 points for that. Noted. All right.
I'll write it down.
If you could. So task crafting is when you change the tasks that you do that more align with you. For example, I'm an accountant who is responsible and hired for keeping track of certain numbers, but I find that these tasks are repetitive. I'm going to learn to write some JavaScript, or I'm going to learn to use some macros in Excel to make my job easier. That certainly wasn't, or may not have been in the job description, but you're changing your task to maybe take to be able to more creative, or maybe you have an IT bend. Relationship crafting, I do this a lot, where I look at the people that are my stakeholders and then find their stakeholders and get to know them and learn those additional people. I like people, despite the fact that I'm in technology, I like the people part. So for me, I am seen as successful because I have decided my relationships will change. So I craft that part of my business. And there's the cognitive crafting, which is, positioning the way that you think about your job. One of my favorite examples of this, I think, is when Kennedy visited Cape Canaveral before we went to the moon, and he was talking to everybody, and he turned to a guy who was emptying the trash can, and the guy said to him, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." So that guy had pivoted from saying, cognitively pivoted, I'm no longer emptying trash cans, I am contributing to putting a man on the moon. Yeah. Now, I think those of you who are listening will probably be texting me later saying that that's an urban legend, but I don't care. It's a great story, and we'll pretend it was real and it applied here. So, but the fact is it does totally apply to this type of cognitive tasking. So I think you just have to understand where you can bend those rules and find a way that it works in your firm.
And I think it also is, that's super interesting to look at it in those 3 different categories. And also, as we all know, that the younger generation, and I air quotes because it's not me, but just people that are a little bit younger, like to understand their purpose. And so if you can give them that ability to, even if it's indirect, to say it is for the bigger purpose of the organization to achieve this, then it has a more purposeful orientation.
Look, I think every employee, regardless of age or experience, it's 3 things, right? It's Dan Pink's 3: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think if you have those 3, and you can take those 3 and enhance them through this job crafting, I now have mastery. I am mastering Excel because I no longer am just plugging numbers in. I'm actually writing macros for that. I am, my autonomy has allowed me to take from just serving up lunch at this restaurant. Now I'm creating works of art. Yeah. Those things really come into play. And I think it drives and motivates people considerably.
All right. So how about, can you give me, maybe if I'm listening to this and I think, I really want to do this. What are some of the things or ideas that you would give me that I need to ask myself or think about? Maybe three, because everybody always says everything in three. Are there three things that you can direct me to do to try to get myself in this job crafting space?
I think first, I would look at the job that you're doing now and figure out where are you already doing this. Find the ways that you have, what are the, or better yet, what are the things about your job that you like the most? I know a teacher who equates their teaching to playing in the band that they played in high school because they love being in front of the crowd and they like performing. And so when we talked about that, it enhanced his or excited him to maybe get involved in more of those kind of activities. And I think it's really doing a self-assessment of what you're doing today as part of your job and how do you, and so to identify the things that you like to do the most. Really, it's know thyself, if you will, and find that.
Okay.
And then I think secondarily, it would be really find a place for you to expand that thing you find, right? You can't, you got to know what you have before you can go there. And I think, and remember that every company is just a bunch of people working together. And even no matter what your thing is, there's going to be some places that you can do that. And I think obviously third, I think asking for help, asking for external perspective on that. Talk to your mentors, talk to your coach. What am I doing when my eyes light up? What are the things that you see me do that really get me excited? Help me connect with those so I can find ways to better do that. So that would be my three good actions you could take to really start job crafting in your role today.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I can even see how as an entrepreneur, I could do that too.
Absolutely.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely things that we do together that I know that these are the things that you have to do, and these are the things you get to do.
Yeah.
And the latter are the ones that are the most fun to share with you for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you bringing this topic because I think it's very important for us to, we're always searching, how do we raise up our purpose, but also our passion, and why not do what we do best and apply that, our best self, really applying our best
and I
self.
often think people forget that you can do the things you like within the construct you have.
Yeah.
Again, my teacher, he likes to perform. Well, he's a teacher. I don't think we're going to do, he's not going to be able to do that. But, when you really ask yourself, well, what gets you excited, there are ways to apply that. So it's
Awesome.
a good approach.
All right. Love it. Appreciate that.
Good
Make sure you
times.
make comments below and tell us what you think and what you've done to start your own job crafting.
Perfect. Look forward to hearing from everybody.